Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing today? Wow, great audience. Looks like we have 8 people here this morning. How's everybody doing? Go ahead and check in on the chat bar if you're here. Dr. Chris Roddenberry coming to you from my office here in Willow Springs, North Carolina. Hope everybody's ready for the exam we have coming this weekend. Fantastic. Hi, Nicholas. Good to see you. Fantastic. Thanks for coming today. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. So what I want to do is take about 30 minutes and go over the exam real quick so that everybody is aware of what's going to be on the exam, and hopefully this will help you study more effectively and do better on the exam. Good morning, Jessica. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Let's see. All right. I got the itchies this morning. Okay, so the exam is actually already available in your exam folder. Okay, let's see. I don't even know if I got the exam up. Oh, yes, let's see. Actually, so the exam is in your exam folder. So if you click on your lessons folder right here, you click on the lessons folder. Click on the lessons folder. Excuse me. Let me show you the one. I clicked the wrong button. Okay, so if you go to your lessons folder right here on the left-hand tab, you can click on the exam folder right here, and you will find exam 1. Actually it won't be available for another 30 minutes. So you just click here, and it will open the exam up. You have until Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. to finish this exam. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a text on Remind this week, and of course this weekend, and of course I'll be monitoring my text all weekend long in case you need help. Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to go to my so that you can sort of see some details. All right. So this is what I'm going to be using for the exam review today to help you out. Okay, so it's exam 1 due Sunday. Actually exam 1's due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. There's going to be 46 questions. 46 questions. It's going to be multiple choice, true, false, matching, and you're going to have 45 minutes to do the exam. Okay, now no notes or books. No notes or books allowed. This is not an open note exam. You have one time to do the exam. Once you open the exam, your timer will start, and you have 45 minutes to continue the exam. Anybody have any questions on the exam procedure? You can find the exam in your lessons folder. 46 questions, multiple choice, true, false, matching. 45 minutes, and it's due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. No notes or books. Any questions so far? Now, what I'm going to do, let's see, chapter 1, 15 questions. Okay. All right, let's see. All right, so I'm going to have 2 questions on early psychologists. Remember Wundt, Fechner, let's see. We have Wundt, Becker, and William James. If you remember, we talked about Freud, Skinner, Watson, and George Miller. So we have 2 questions on those. Now, I do have one question specifically on Freud's theory. Okay. Good morning, Crafty Table. Thanks for showing up. So there's going to be 2 general questions on the early psychologists. Who was the first to measure the mind, which will be Fechner. Who was the first to open a psych lab was Wundt. Who wrote the first textbook, William James. And then I talked to you a little bit about what each of the early theorists was interested in. So Freud was interested in unconscious conflict. Watson was interested in the environment and how that affected our behavior. And George Miller was the first cognitive psychologist. These are all going to be fairly general questions to sort of identify each person. No detail on their theory is necessary. Just who were these 6 people? And I've picked one of them to ask, 2 of them to ask questions about. And I just want you to know what these people did in general. However, there is a chart, one of your PowerPoint slides. I talked about Freud's theory. And so there is one question specifically on Freud's theory. Okay? Now, let's see. There are 3 questions on the modern subfields. Okay? Now I'm going to put a star here because one of these questions is a matching question. So actually, although it's only 3 questions, you're going to have to know 7 different, I guess 8 different, 1, 2, and then 4, 6 different modern subfields for these 3 questions. 2 of them are multiple choice, and one of them is going to be a matching question where I ask you to match the subfields with the activities that people in that subfield might in fact do. Okay? I've got 3 questions on general notes about research. Okay? And sort of theories versus hypotheses and the research process. Okay? Research process. And in fact, the research process is an ordering question. Oh, actually, I forgot. I do have one ordering question. So you're going to put the steps of the research process in order. So there's one slide where I talk about the different steps that psychologists go through as they engage in the research process. And I'm going to want you to know that. Okay? And then there are 6 questions on research methods. Okay? And those include things like experiments, correlations, and descriptive methods. Okay. So that represents chapter 1. Does anyone have any questions about chapter 1? Do you have any, do you understand what I'm going to be interested in? You know what? I forgot to do this. Hold on just a second. I can't believe I forgot to do this today. Huh. I completely forgot to turn on my studio lights. There you go. Okay. Any questions on chapter 1? I'm going to wait for just a second to see if anybody has any questions. Okay, cool. Okay. So if you add these up, let's see, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15 questions on chapter 1. Okay, let's go ahead and clear that off. Let's see. Okay. The notes for chapter 2. Chapter 2. 15 questions as well. Okay. So I've got one question on brain research methods. Remember we talked about lesioning, fMRI, DTI, EEG studies. So I've got one question about brain research methods. Excuse me, that's one question. Then I've got 4 questions on localization of function. One general question, and then 3 questions on what does this brain area do. Okay, so for example, I might ask you what the fusiform gyrus does. I might ask you what the corpus callosum does. I might ask you what the pons does. I might ask you what the cerebellum does. So I'm going to have one general question about brain localization and this idea that different abilities are focused on different areas of the brain. And then I'm going to ask you to tell me the function of 3 different areas. Okay. Let's see. Then I'm going to have 2 questions about the difference between nerves and tracts. Okay. Remember, nerves are bundles of axons that we find in the peripheral nervous system, and we refer to tracts as bundles of neurons that we find. Nerves are bundles of axons that we find in the peripheral nervous system, and tracts are bundles of axons that we find in the central nervous system. And so we'll talk about nerves and tracts. I'll talk about afferents versus efferents, right? Okay. Remember, an afferent is a set of axons that are leaving a brain area, and efferents are a set of axons that are coming into a brain area, right? We talk about, I suggested to you that neurons are one-way communicators, and so a bundle of axons carrying information from an area to another, telling that area what to do is an afferent, and a bundle of axons coming into a brain area from a different brain area that are bringing information in are called efferents. Okay, let's see. I've got 3 general questions on neurons versus glial cells. What do they do? And these are sort of general questions. All right, just general questions. And then I've got 3 questions on neurons and neurotransmitter. And those are sort of like activity and structure. So I'm going to want you to know the different parts of the neuron, and I have a slide with the neurotransmitter functions, and you're going to have to match each neurotransmitter with the activities that occur there. I'm going to put a star here. I'm actually going to put 2 stars here because there's going to be a matching question for the neurotransmitters, and there's actually going to be a matching question for the parts of the neurotransmitter. Okay, let's see. And 10, where am I? Let me see. 5, 6, 8, and 2. Let's see, nerves versus tracts. I got that. Brain areas, localization of function. Oh, I take that back. I've actually got 6 questions here. 6 questions. All right, that's where I've got the mistake. Okay, so that's 7, that's 10, that's 15 questions. Okay. Okay. All right. And that represents chapter 2. Does anybody have any questions about the content on chapter 2? I hope I'm being specific enough. I hope I'm being specific enough and giving you enough detail. Any questions? I'm going to wait for a second in the chat bar. I will give you a general note while we're talking. As a general rule, I try to talk about the things that I think are important in lecture. So although I do not guarantee that something can't come from your book that I didn't mention at all, as a general rule, I try to talk about the things that I want that I'm going to talk about on the exam, and I typically put that information in your PowerPoint slides too. So I'm not trying to be tricky with this exam by purposefully leaving stuff out. However, occasionally that does happen, so it's important that you be familiar with and look at your book. Okay. I'm not getting any questions in the chat bar, so I'm assuming that you understand exactly that you don't have any questions about what's going to be in chapter 3 of your textbook. Let's go back to the whiteboard. Okay, chapter 3, 16 questions. Okay, chapter 3, 16 questions. Okay, there are going to be 4 questions about the global workspace model. Okay, those are going to include general questions about what the global workspace model is, and then I talked about demonstrations of this model. Remember, we talked about split brain and some other demonstrations. So I talked about generally what the global workspace model represents, how it argues that we create consciousness, and then there are some demonstrations that I think show this global workspace model in action. So we've got 4 about the global workspace model. Now, I talked about the debates in consciousness. There are some debates about what consciousness is. Okay, I've got 2 questions on that. Let's see. All right. I've got 2 questions on sleep research techniques. Let's see. Misspelled techniques. Techniques and types of brain activity they measure. Can anybody tell me what is the major brain sleep research tool that is used? Can anybody tell me what the sleep research measurement tool is used. And hopefully you're focusing on this review right now. Can anybody tell me? Can anybody tell me what type of electrical activity your brain is generating at this very moment? I'd be curious to see if anybody knew that in the chat bar right now. Okay. Now, this particular technology is used in the study of sleep while people are actually sleeping. So I'm going to want you to know differences between REM and non-REM sleep. Okay. I want you to know the other stages of sleep. 2, deep sleep, etc. Okay. Beta waves, fantastic. Crafty Table and Lewis were both correct. And what tool do we use to demonstrate beta waves versus alpha waves versus sleep spindles versus delta waves? Does anybody know? Does anybody know? If you don't know, you should know that for the exam. Okay? Let's see, that's 6, 10, 13, and then I have 2 questions on sleep disorders or sleep problems. You know, sleepwalking and sleep talking isn't necessarily a sleep disorder. Very good, Nicholas. Okay, everybody knows EEG. Boom, there you go. So I think you've already got a question down. And I'm going to put a star right here. There is a matching question. So I'm going to have the different sleep disorders I talked on the last slide of chapter 3, and I'm going to have you match the sleep disorders with their descriptions. Okay? Okay? Okay. So those are the 46 questions that I'm going to ask you on this exam. There will be no short answer questions, but there will be multiple choice, mostly multiple choice. There'll probably be, I don't know, 4 or 5 true false questions. There will be at least, I think, 3, maybe 4 matching questions, and then 1 ordering questions where I ask you to put the steps of the research process in order. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want me to go over anything from class? This exam review was a little shorter than normal. Typically, my exam reviews last 30 to 35 minutes. This first exam is only 3 chapters. From here on out, your exams are going to be 4 chapters. So exam 2 and exam 3 are going to represent 4 chapters. So those reviews will take a little bit longer. And your final exam will include 4 chapters plus a cumulative part. Now, you might say, oh my God, cumulative exams. What I'm going to focus on for the cumulative exams are your knowledge of the research subfields. So when we talked about chapter 2, we were talking about biological psychology. When we get to chapter 4, we're going to talk about developmental psychology. When we get to chapter 7, we're going to talk about cognitive psychology. When we get to chapter 11, we're going to talk about health psychology. In chapters 14 and 15, we're going to talk about clinical psychology. And so all those things, and these are basically going to be going back over the content in chapter 1. Chapter 1, I introduced you to the subfields of psychology. So we're going to keep hitting that the entire semester. And what you're going to notice is in your homework questions or in your exam questions throughout the semester, I'm going to ask you to be able to recognize these different fields of psychology. And so on the final exam, I'm going to ask you again to make sure that you remember these subfields of psychology, because I think it's an important thing that you should know from this class. Also, we're going to keep talking about different areas of the brain throughout the semester, which is what I introduced in chapter 2 when we talked about localization of function. So we talked about the hypothalamus in chapter 3, and I talked specifically about the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Guess what? I'm probably going to ask you about that again on the final. When we get to motivation and emotion, I'm going to talk about the hypothalamus in general as the part of your brain that controls motivated behavior, like eating, sex, getting in out of the cold. And so we're going to talk about that again. When we go to chapter 7, I'm going to talk to you about the hippocampus and the amygdala and their role in memory. So guess what? You're going to find that on the final exam. When we get to chapter 5 and talk about sensation and perception, I'm going to talk about the visual cortex and the occipital lobe. I'm going to talk about the gustatory and olfactory cortices that you'll see in the frontal lobe. I'm going to talk about the auditory cortex and the temporal lobe. So guess what? You're going to see those again in the final. So as you learn, especially the brain areas and the subfields of psychology, keep in mind that you need to know those not only for the exam that you're taking that particular on those particular chapters, but realize that that information is going to come back into play for your final exam as well. Okay? Does anyone have any final questions? I see Riley says, no, sir. Which part of your brain is responsible for maintaining your sense of balance and giving you smooth motor movements? Does anybody know which part of the brain is responsible for balance and smooth motor movements? I'm going to go ahead and wait for that in the chat bar. Can anybody tell me what the structure is? What structure connects your left hemisphere with your right hemisphere? Does anybody know that? Does anybody know that? I'd be curious. The structure that is responsible for the maintaining balance and smooth motor movements is your cerebellum. Your cerebellum. And Louis Tapia, yes. Yes, absolutely. Nicholas and Louis both know that the corpus callosum is the part of your brain that connects the left half of your brain, your left cerebral cortex, with your right cerebral cortex. That might be important on exam 1. I'm not sure, but maybe it'll help you. Okay. I see we don't have any questions, and a couple of you knew what the corpus callosum was. So I'm going to go ahead and log off now. Your second week's collaboration has been graded with extra credit. If I somehow made a mistake in calculating your extra credit or your participation for week 2, go ahead and send me a text and I will be more than happy to take a look at that. Was that question in the book or in lecture? Actually, I talked about both. They're both in the book, and I talked about them in lecture as well, Anya. Thank you for asking. Don't forget, you still have homework due tonight at 11:59. You have your chapter 3, your week 2 homework that covers chapters 2 and chapters 3. That's due tonight at 11:59 p.m. And if you're 5 minutes late or an hour late getting that in, I usually don't have a big problem with that. So just try to get it in around 11:59 p.m. tonight. Your exam just became available 1 minute ago, or excuse me, it's 8:59. Will become available in 1 minute, and you have all weekend to get that exam done. All right, folks, have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you Monday morning when we begin talking about Chapter 4, Developmental Psychology. All right, you folks have a great day, and I will talk to you next week.